Hey, so today I'm going to be using ArcGIS Pro to make some Choropleth maps and run a Moran's Eye, a spatial autocorrelation on some FEMA data. So here I have ArcGIS Pro, and the first thing I want to do is go ahead and bring up a web browser. A quick little tip is that as you can click on the help here, it always brings up your web browser. Here I'm going to Google FEMA GIS data, and they have a GIS data feed web page, which you can see here. What the data I'm going to be using is going to be the historical disaster declarations, which basically is the disaster declaration database for the United States. And just a little bit of background: in 1964, I believe, the Presidential Disaster Declaration Act was made in Congress, which is basically a slush fund. And you can see here that FEMA has the ability to distribute money whenever the president declares a disaster. And so this data set here actually has, if you go through the metadata, it has all the disasters that have happened in the United States since 1964, or at least the declared ones. And it has them broken up by number of disasters or types of disasters, so forth. If I look here, I can see that I have a shapefile that I can download. So that's what I'm going to download. So when I download that shapefile, that's going to bring me a zip folder. Remember, when working with zip folders, you can't bring those in directly into ArcGIS Pro. You're going to have to extract those first before you can use them. So I'm gonna let this go ahead and download. It's taking a little bit of time, so let's give it a second. Okay, so now the download happened. So if I click on it, it's going to show it to me in Windows Explorer. But you need to remember here, even though you're seeing it here in Windows Explorer, it's not extracted yet. It's still just a file. And so the issue that we're having now is that we need all these files extracted in order to use them. You can see with these old shape files that they come with a lot of associated files. You need to keep in mind that even though you have this main shape file here, that's what you might be thinking that you want to use. Sorry, this one over here. It's not the only file you need. You need every single file for it to work. The DBF, for example, is your attribute table. The PRJ is your projection file with projection information. So you basically need everything here. So if you go to compressed folders, you have an option there for extract all. And then once you want to extract all, then you can go actually into your computer and make a folder where you extract it. Now I'm extracting it here, and you see that those files will all show up into my folder here. And now these files are going to be ready for ArcGIS Pro. So I'm going to head back over to ArcGIS Pro, and I'm going to go ahead and make a new map. When I create a map, I'm going to call it FEMA, and I'm going to go put it into that same folder where I put the data. So that was an M, GIS, and FEMA. And I'm not going to make a new subfolder because I want my home folder to actually be the FEMA folder. So I go ahead and I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to give me now my new project. Because of the way that I set it up, you can see here, if I go back over to my Windows Explorer, the ArcGIS project is showing up here, including the geodatabase and everything else associated with the ArcGIS project. If I come back over here and look at my folders, you can see that my home folder is already FEMA, which is going to have that shapefile existing here. One thing to keep in mind is that whenever you look at the file here, you might see multiple files. But whenever you look at an Arc catalog, you'll see them as one single file. If you're not seeing your folder here, that means that you might have left that checkbox clicked, or you might have saved your file somewhere else. That's okay, because you can always go here to folders. If you right click here, you can always add a folder connection and navigate to any folder that you want to and connect it. Then that will show up here, and you'll be able just to add it. So I'm going to go ahead and add in this declaration shapefile into my current map by right-clicking and saying add to map. Another option, of course, I can just drag it here. But what you see is now that the polygon file gets added in here, and then the projection changes. So there's a couple issues that are already happening for my Choropleth map here. One is maybe the projection isn't the best. And so if I look here, what's going on is that the declarations, if I look under the source, I can see that its projection under spatial reference is just in WGIS 1984 unprojected, and that's what happened to my display projection. If I look at the map itself and I look at the properties over here, you can see under coordinate systems it's just matching the FEMA Presidential Declaration. If I want to go back to Web Mercator, I can hit OK here, and then I'll go back to Web Mercator and get something what I'm more familiar with. Okay, that's what the projection of the base map is. Sometimes when it comes to projections, it might be better actually not to use Web Mercator. Another option that you can always use on there is actually go into your coordinate systems, and the projection that I like to use is the Albers equal area projection. So what I can do is search for Albers and go to my projected continental and North America, and then here I'm going to see that I have a US contiguous Albers equal area conic. I can favorite that if I want to save it for later and go ahead OK. The only problem with Albers is that it's a conical projection, and so while the 48 look really great, you can see Hawaii is kind of up on its side, and Alaska is also as well kind of pointed in a different direction. So if you're going to make this into a map composition later, you might want to consider actually putting Alaska and Hawaii into their own maps and add them as subsetted maps. Puerto Rico too, sometimes we can think about that as well because it's a little bit off, but so for north, and so we can actually put it on its own frame as well. So now we have this GIS file that we brought in, this shapefile, and you can see here that it has a lot of different polygons. If I want, I can turn off the base maps and just have only the shapefile. If I zoom in on it and I look at it, you can see that each one of these are different counties, and if I click on any one of the counties, you can get the kind of attribute information for that county. If I expand that, I can see that, for example, in Oklahoma, we have here Harper County, and it has a total of 6 declarations that have happened since 1964, and it breaks down the different types of declarations. Here's a total declaration here, again, repeat of it, but if you keep on going down, we should suspect that most of these are tornadoes, but let's see what we got going on here. Here's tornado actually with 0 declarations, so it's interesting to see Oklahoma not having tornado. It has other storms as their most biggest declaration. Interesting. Okay, so anyways, that's, if you want to quickly see a county. But what we want to do is more look at trends, and probably the best way to look at trends is through what we call a Choropleth map. If we open up the attribute table here, we can see the different attributes that we have going on here, and we can decide that total declarations is the one that we want to look at. But if we look at the other ones here, we can kind of get an idea of what they're referring to by the names. So other, storm, ice, so forth. If you have a question in particular about one of these, you can always go back to the FEMA website where they have the metadata. And if you go to this metadata, it's going to go into detail what each one of these actually mean. And so, for example, if I go to total and I can search total, it will tell you that it has the total frequencies of presidential declarations. If you go deeper into it, you'll see here it kind of breaks it down and tells you here. So for example, frequency 64 to 2011 is the declarations between 64 and 2011. Okay, if you kind of look at the different numbers, different attributes here, you'll find out what they stand for, but a lot of it's kind of self-explanatory anyway. So if I go back here, what I want to do is actually show these total declarations as color gradients, so I can be able to start distinguishing what exactly is going on. So I'm going to go here and zoom to layer to get the whole United States. Remember, those territories of Guam are getting you this extra zoomed out version. If you do the shift button, hold the shift button and you click, you can draw a zoom rectangle and be able to zoom in really nice and tight on the lower 48. We're first going to focus on the 48 states. And so anyways, if I want to make a Choropleth map, I'm going to go here to the properties of the layers, and under that I'm going to have a, oh sorry, it's not here, I'm thinking ArcMap. You actually want to go to what we call Symbology. So I'm going to right click that and I'm going to choose the Symbology, and that's going to bring up the Symbology tab here on the side. Right now you can see that I'm basically just mapping it out a single symbol, but what I can do is actually drop this down and I could choose here graduated colors, and what that's going to do is create that Choropleth map. Right now you can see that we're mapping out by object ID, which is not very productive. Basically it's just numbering it out by the state names. But if I go here and I drop this down, I can choose here to use total declarations. It's going to have some breaks that it's going to automatically give. I like to put in a 0 break because I think that having a 0 break is actually important. And so what I like doing sometimes is bumping the classes up to one more than I need, and then going up into the very first one and changing its upper value to 0. I think that's having no disasters is actually a pretty interesting thing to think about. If I go here and after, I can put in numbers that kind of make sense to me, but just remember that whenever you're going through these and you're putting in numbers, you're actually changing the way the numbers are being represented on the map, which can actually cause some lying with maps. So you want to keep that in mind. So now I have here all my different declarations kind of written out: 0, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15. I'm going to go ahead and here and put a 20, and then I want to have the upper limit being just the 20 up until 30, and so I'm going to just put here 30. The reason why I'm putting 30 is because in this total declarations, if I go into it and actually say statistics, you can see here from it that the distribution goes from 0 to 29, and so the max is 29. So in a way I am still misleading with my numbers by using 30 as the highest. So I could be thinking maybe I should put a 29 there if I want to be extremely transparent, and that would give me the map up until 29. So that's why I'm not misleading the total declarations that are happening. And so now I can see here the declarations that are happening within the United States. And one thing that I'm noticing just straight off the bat is that some areas have more disasters than other areas. So for example, if I zoom here into Florida, you can see that you can kind of see the Florida-Georgia line, which that's kind of interesting already in itself, that you can see that different areas of Florida have different amounts of disasters. If I go back into my previous extent by pushing the back button, I can go and look at other areas, United States. But one of the trends, besides looking at Georgia and Illinois, that's another one that's interesting. Why am I able to even make out a state? And so there could be some different ideas here, but this kind of gets to the point that natural disasters aren't very natural. One aspect of a natural disaster is that it has an impact on people, and so you'll have to have a population of people in order to experience the disaster. That's one aspect of it. The next aspect is that it also is a political act, and so whenever you look at things like, for example, here Alabama and Florida, there is a different political system for disaster declarations. I doubt that the frequency of extreme events are much higher or lower compared to Georgia, but you can really see the Georgia borders, and what it makes me think is that Georgia is having a is not making all the claims that it could for a disaster declaration. So now we kind of just said we don't think that this is happening in a random sort of fashion. What we can do is actually test that by looking at the Moran's eye. And so if we go into the analysis and we go look into our tools, we can search for Moran's eye, which is also known as autocorrelation. And so I can see here spatial autocorrelation Moran's eye. And if I click on that, it's going to give me the option here for choosing the input class as disaster declarations, and the input field I want to say total declarations, and I want to generate a report. That's going to actually generate a report into my documents folder as a HTML file, which is pretty nice. And then we're going to hit run. If you're having any problem running this, it's because you don't have the Spatial Analyst extension turned on. If you don't have the Spatial Analyst extension turned on, you're going to have to go over to projects, go into your licensing, and then under licensing you'll see here if you have Spatial Analyst extension turned on, which you can see I don't have it turned on. And so let's see if it's even going to run. I wonder actually if it will run. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run and see what happens. It's thinking about it, and I think it's maybe going to error out. Maybe not. Okay, well, if it does error out on you, you might want to think about turning on the spatial analysis extension, which you would just go back over here to projects. For some reason mine is working. So if I look here into the statistics, it's always going to say warnings. The warnings are just about the fact that you're using statistics, and so you should be a little bit careful about how you interpret them. But if you look here, you have here the different settings and parameters, and if you go down under the messages, you'll have here some results that you can see. So you have here some summaries of z-scores and p-values, but what's more interesting is this HTML file that got written into the GIS FEMA folder. So if I go back over to my FEMA folder, you'll see here this Moran I result, which I can double click, and it'll give me my nice spatial autocorrelation report, which is telling me that I'm having a clustered result. Okay, and so this is the result of the spatial autocorrelation that can tell you something's going on here a little bit more than just natural disasters happening randomly. Something's influencing them, and so it might gives you the idea maybe I should try to start controlling for some other variables like political, like different types of geographic locations. Maybe it could be one even, for example, hurricanes aren't going to be hitting Seattle anytime soon, so you can try to find that kind of patterns and try to control for them and do further statistical analysis, which we can we'll look at a different time. But if you go back to your map, so this is interesting, and if you wanted to include this into your report, you can always print this as a PDF. And so if I hit print here, I have the option to choose I want to make a PDF, save as a PDF, and I can just save it and include it into any PDF map that I make. So I just hit save here, and then I'll go over back to my M drive, GIS, and FEMA. And I can say Moran I reports, and that will actually make my PDF version of it. So if I go back over here, and I can see I have a PDF version, even though it's showing up as a Chrome HTML document. That's just because I use Chrome to open my PDFs. And so you can see here that you have a PDF now created of it. Okay, now if I go back over to my map, now I want to communicate this, and so I want to actually work in a layout. And so the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to go here and I'm going to insert and say I want to make a new layout, and I will choose a letter, and I'm going to go with the landscape letter, and that's going to put this here. And what I do after that is I want to add in my map frame, and so what I can do is I can draw this box here, and then all of a sudden my map will show up inside the box, which is great. I'm including Puerto Rico on there. If I activate this, I can always use this to move this around a little bit as well, which is kind of cool. And also I want to start thinking about that Alaska and Hawaii. And so the only way I can really work with Alaska and Hawaii is I have to actually make a new map. And so I actually have to go here and actually copy my map in my project. And so what I need to do is actually head over to my project, insert in my catalog. So I go here and I insert in, it's under view, and I say catalog pane. And what that's going to do is bring up this folder, which I have maps. My map that I have here, I like it a lot. I'm happy with it. So what I can do is I can copy that map and actually paste it here, and actually have a second map, which is map 1. This map, actually I want to open it, and I want to make it with Alaska. So Alaska should have a different projection because it is Alaska, and it has you don't want to be on its side. And so if I hit properties and coordinate system, I actually look back in that I can just type here Alaska, and what I want to do is actually match that equal area projection that I was using before, but just to use an Alaska one instead. So I'm going to use Alaska outburst equal area. When I hit OK, now you'll see that the United States on its side, or the 48 are on their side. But if I go over here, I see Alaska looks great. Okay, and so I can go ahead and use my shift click, draw a really nice box around Alaska, and then I can go back over to my layout. Okay, and then this time, whenever I'm adding in a map frame, I'm choosing the Alaska one. And so now I can add in Alaska, and it should come in. Great. And so it's actually showing up here a little bit too zoomed out. And so what I want to do is activate that frame and zoom out a little bit on it, which I can just scroll out a little bit and zoom it. See if I can get this to work. Great, that looks perfect. So I go ahead and exit out of that, and now I have Alaska in its place. And I can maybe bring this down a little bit here. Great. Good. And then so I can do the exact same thing with Hawaii and Puerto Rico. It's just basically repeating the same, or Puerto Rico, maybe this can work for Puerto Rico, but you know, repeating the same thing with going back over here, duplicating the map layout. Once it's duplicated, actually going into it, and then if I want to be really nice, I can rename these, but going into it and actually going to the properties and changing it now to Hawaii projection. And I can look under projected coordinate systems, because that's where the equal area projections are going to be. And if I look here, I can see that Hawaii has an outburst equal area there. When I hit OK on that, of course, everything else looks terrible. But if I was to zoom again to Hawaii, Hawaii is going to look exactly the way it's supposed to look. So I can zoom in on a nice, nicely on Hawaii, and then head back over to my layout, where I can say insert the map frame and choose Hawaii. And so now I bring in Hawaii over here, and it might again be a little bit weird on the zoom, but what I can always do is right click and say activate and zoom out just a little bit just to get Hawaii into the frame. Nice, I think that looks good. And then I can come out of that. Okay, great. So now the only thing really left is inserting things like legends. So I can go here into my insert, and I can do things like a north arrow, or I can add in things like a legend. I think legend is probably the most important thing that we can do. And so I'm going to insert here on the map caller, the legend, and it's saying that it's not big enough. There we go. So it's coming in now, but I don't really like the defaults on that, because bringing in that title of the file. So if I go into the properties of the legend, I can go here and actually start turning off things. Like so, I guess I don't want to have the legend items. So I go here to show items, and I can take off the layer name, and maybe I take off the heading, and I just leave it like that. So that's pretty good. And then I let that drop there. Okay, and then I can insert in other aspects, like for example a title. So I can just go here with the text and draw a box here, and I can say FEMA Disaster, or maybe I can look at that how they set it on FEMA. Let's try to use the same FEMA Presidential Disaster Declarations. Okay, frequency. Why not? I'm gonna just use the same thing that they used. I could try to be a little bit more nice about it if I wanted. Anyways, when you're making your map, you can do a better job. Let's see. Great. So maybe I take off the FEMA. If the text is too big, again, you can go over into it and change here the text sizes. When you go to text symbol, they have here an option on appearance, and right now you can see the size is 76. Maybe that's too big, so I drop it down to 24, for example, hit apply, and I say okay, I like that. Okay, another thing you might want to also think about is adding in captions. Captions are nice for explaining where the data came from or what you're trying to depict. It can help the map reader know what you're trying to do. And so you can go here and draw rectangle text. That's the way I like to do it. And I can add in here a little information about the map. This map is from FEMA. You can do a better job on that again as well. So I'm being a little quick about this because I want to wrap this up, but you know, spend some time actually making your map look really nice. It's probably better than mine, and if you do make a nice map, go ahead and share it. That'd be fun. Anyways, now we're talking about sharing. Let's go ahead and export this. We can export this layout as a PDF, and I can put it in the exact same place that I've been working in, and then that is going to be now in my FEMA folder as a PDF of the map itself. So you can see it's getting written. There it is, layout. If I open this up, I can see it now in Google Chrome. Looks great. And again, this is just a normal file, so if I wanted to share it with someone, I can just email it to someone, or I can upload it to any web page that I need. So anyways, that's how you work with this lab. Again, my map doesn't look so good, but I need to see what kind of map you can make. Maybe you'll do a better job than me.